What's going on, YouTube? Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, welcome. So this is part 2 of the 2001 BMW 530i rebuild. If you haven't seen part 1 was basically me showing off the vehicle that I purchased off Craigslist for $950. We were knocking out some of the cooling issues in that video as far as the thermostat, the water pump, and that radiator. And I talked about how in this video we were going to be dealing with the intake problems, the crankcase valve problems, and we're going to be restoring those 2 heater pipes that sit under the intake. So we're going to be knocking out all that in this video, and then towards the end we're going to try to fire it up and see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and start. In this first part of the video we're going to be taking that intake off, and I'll be kind of showing clips off in between everything and explaining as we go. So without further ado, let's get this video started, guys, and see what happens.
Ah, that hurt.
There she goes.
Hold on. Alright, pull it. 2 hands, son.
So we got it off. I noticed there was some acorns in there, so I got my vacuum right here, and all I do is just stuff this tool in there like that and just suck it in, put it in each hole, clean it up. Alright, you guys, so you saw taking off that intake. It was a little bit of work. I did not fully record every single step just to save you guys on time. But it's a little challenging to take it off, a little bit more challenging to put it back on. But we got the intake off. Now we're going to start digging deep into those 2 heater pipes that were underneath the intake that actually ruptured, causing the coolant to leak and overheat. So you'll see in the next video, there's a hole on the side of one of the pipes where all that nasty coolant kind of built up and got corroded, so it made that hole and that caused it to leak. The other one had that same issue, so once we figured out that it was corroded, I went ahead and started cleaning out the holes that they go into. So when you clean that out, you'll put the new ones in there and it'll all run smoothly again. So without further ado, let's go check that out. After taking off the intake, you can see that the pipe is just totally corroded with that dry, cooled up coolant. I don't know how well you can see it. I'm trying to get to it, but you can see that pipe right there actually created a hole on the side right there. So that's probably what caused it to overheat. And you can see on the other one, it's the same thing, all that corrosion. So what I'm going to do now is try to clean out those 2 holes right there. I don't know how well you can see it. It's a little bit blocked, so I'm going to take a surgical tool and clean out those holes to create a pathway for the new coolant. So I'm going to just start picking at it. It doesn't hurt too to take a vacuum and just kind of suck out all that crap out of there. I don't know how well you can see it. So I just kind of try to vacuum all that crap out of there. Too, I was able to get that old gasket off of there. You see how corroded that thing is, really nasty. So now I'm taking a red mesh right here. We're going to be scrubbing out the ends to clean it out. So once we put that new pipe in, it's going to be really good. So I just take the mesh and I just easily run it through. Get a little light for you. Just take the mesh, put it in here. I just run it through there and clean out that old crap that's in there. And I just stick it in like this. Just like that. And that's been giving me pretty good results as opposed to just using my finger. So just a little tip. Alright, everybody, so I just got done with the mesh, and you can see those 2 holes are extremely clean now. so we can put the pipe back in there. You can see that one right there is a lot better than before. We got all that junk out of there. All right, so now that we got those two issues addressed, we're gonna go ahead and put that intake back on. But before that, I gotta clean off where the intake manifold used to sit on, make it nice and clean, because the cleaner the surface is, the smoother that surface is, the more it's gonna stick on. It's gonna give you a better hold. So we're gonna go ahead and clean that up. And on top of that, I went ahead and replaced that crankcase vent valve. So we replaced the 3 breather hoses, the oil separator hose, and the actual crankcase vent valve. I didn't document all that on video. I could not find the footage, but it's very hard to get that on camera. But you can see it has all that new material there. But once we put that on there, that intake was ready to go back on. So it was a pretty simple swap. Once you swapped it over, you gotta make sure everything's cleaned up. And once everything's cleaned up, we went ahead and put it back. So let's go ahead and check it out. I'm gonna get ready to get the intake on. So what I have to do is take that mesh and clear this up so we can put the intake back on there. You can see a lot of corrosion and just junk gets piled up in there, so we're gonna clean that up. I've successfully cleaned up the intake. You can see how clear and shiny that looks. Looks good, and we can start putting that intake back on there. So right now the coolant pipes are going back on. We got these OEM, and we're putting them back on in the holes that we cleaned up. So as you can see on this side, we reinserted into those holes that I cleaned up earlier. I got the new gasket for the intake right here, and the secondary air pump hose that I'm gonna put on there, and we're gonna reinstall that intake. Got the old gaskets dry rotted and bad, so we're gonna take it out. Show you guys a little bit better. See, sometimes it can be a challenge to get out of there. You can see how nasty and dry rotted that is. So I'm gonna put that new one in there right now. All right, everybody, I got the intake gasket back on there. See how it's nice and orange again. It's not dry rotted like before. You can feel it's really good again. We're working on the secondary air hose right now. It was rotted, so right now we're gonna get the new one on there as well. Okay, so we're getting the hoses back on that pump. So we're getting the intake back on. You can see we plugged in that hose from the secondary air pump back. We're getting the fuel lines and everything back situated. So it's a process. We're getting back to it. All right, you guys. So at this point, we have everything back together on top of the motor. We have the intake back on there. Everything with the crankcase all good. But when we put the radiator back and we started to fill it up, we did one test, and I noticed that on that test there was a leak coming from the bottom radiator hose, I believe, and I suspected that the expansion tank was leaking. So at that point I decided to order a new expansion tank, and as well as an auxiliary pump, because I noticed that when we were bleeding it, it started to ooze out a little bit. So, you know, with that being said, it's possible that auxiliary pump was bad, so we went and tested the pump, and it ended up being a bad pump. So we get that ordered, as well as the expansion tank. So we're gonna get those put on, and we'll see what happens. All right, you guys, so I got the parts right now. So I ordered a auxiliary water pump right here, and I also got the new expansion tank. So basically, after putting the coolant in yesterday and opening that cap, there was fumes coming out, and it can also be caused because the auxiliary pump goes bad. And I noticed that there was a leak with that expansion tank right there, just a couple drops. So I'm gonna fix that leak, get that pump in. And what happens is, if you don't have the pump working, it's gonna be very hard to bleed the coolant system, so you won't properly be able to tell if it's a head gasket or not. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace this pump, then fix that leak with the expansion tank, and we'll see if it's really a head gasket or not. Okay, so after draining the system, I took out the fan and the fan shroud, and now we're gonna get rid of this expansion tank, put the new one on there, and then put that new auxiliary pump right there. Okay, so I got that new expansion tank from Bear out. I'm about to put on this fan shroud. I took the old one out, and then connect those two right there in the bottom hose and put that back on. So So I got that new expansion tank on there, hooked up the hoses here, the second one back there, really good looking barrel expansion tank. Working on getting the auxiliary pump off and replaced. So we got that new auxiliary pump, we got everything hooked up again. You can see that expansion tank right there. I'm gonna drop it and start filling it up. So right now we're pouring some coolant in, bleeding it out. You can see those bubbles come out. You gotta make sure those bubbles come out while you pour it. Okay, so now I have the car in the on position, not actually on yet. We're gonna let the auxiliary water pump do its thing for a couple minutes and then turn it on. Okay, now I'm gonna actually turn the car on and give it full blast of heat. There we go, full blast. Temperature set all the hot. There we go. I don't know if you guys can see the temperature gauge is making its way to the middle. Nothing's overheating so far. I got it cranked up on full heat and I'm just feeling it out right now. Alright, so now I'm testing the AC. The heat was great. The AC is looking great. It's not overheating at all, so I'm gonna take it on the spin around the block, see what happens. Alright, so I'm back at the shop. I want to put back on the lift, and I see there's something leaking again, man. I mean, it wouldn't be a BMW if it wasn't leaking, right? So this time it's not leaking from that bottom hose. It's actually leaking, looks like, from the expansion tank. Not too sure what's going on there, so I'm going to drop it and take a look up top. I don't like what I'm seeing, guys. You see that? A lot of dripping coming from that tank, from that cap, going down, and what it believes to look like to me is that it's catching a lot of extra pressure from the motor and forcing it out. So I mean, it looked like a blown head gasket, man. I mean, this is heartbreaking right here. It might be because we added too much coolant, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't want to believe it. So, man, this is crazy. I don't know, man. BMW, you guys are crazy. You give me anxiety because I hate when stuff leaks, and that's all these things do is leak. All you guys just leak oil and coolant and everything, but I still love it. I still love BMW. I still love you, baby. Don't be mad at me now. So we're gonna check it out tomorrow, and hopefully it's not a blown head, but we'll see. All right, so I wiped that cap off a little bit. I don't know how well you can see it, but it stopped leaking, and I don't know if we overfilled it a little bit too much or what, but you know, when you bleed a system, you do have to overfill it. So it is possible that it's just because of overfilling it. So what I'm gonna do is leave it on the rack overnight and then check it out in the morning when it's cold, so we can kind of positively determine if it's a blown head or not. So as you can see, even though I got good heat and good AC, that doesn't necessarily mean that the head gasket's not bad. It's still leaking really bad out that expansion tank, which to me could be a head gasket, could be overfilled. I'm not going to do anything with it hot, so I'm going to wait till tomorrow when it's nice and cold to try to take out a little bit of the coolant, because like I said, you got to overfill it a little bit, and with it being turned off, it's not running through and you can overfill it a little bit too much. So with that being said, the best thing to do now is to just let it cool down and check it out tomorrow, and hopefully it's not that blown head gasket, but we'll see. So with that being said, this is going to be the conclusion of this video. I appreciate everybody for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.